Good morning, good morning, good morning, good morning. I'm back. I hope you're back too. You know, when I'm doing this, I can just, in my mind's eye, see all of you. It's like, oh, hi, Donna. Hi, Jim. Hi, Scott. You know, like you're really there. And I could go on and on with the names. Myra. um, where did I leave off? Oh, I left off with Belli. We had been married in the Shinto ceremony, and he was drunk, as usual. And you know, we head back for the U.S., and Mel kept the entire plane mesmerized with his stories. And he wasn't the lover that he'd been on the way to Japan. But we had to stop in Hawaii because we had done all this so quickly that I hadn't gotten a smallpox shot, and I didn't have my record with me. So I had to get a smallpox shot. And Mel had arranged for us to stay with, I've got to get the sound over here. Hey, is that better? Mel had arranged for us to stay in an apartment house in Hawaii. And, you know, God, the synchronicity of things that happened are unbelievable, truly. On the way from the airport, because there were no reporters at the airport, and Mel was saying, where are the reporters? I don't know, you know. So on the way to this apartment, there were barriers all the way, and so Mel said, what's going on, you know? They're stopping the traffic and so forth. And the driver said, President Johnson is coming in, and he's going to be in that, what is that big pink hotel, you know. He was going to be there in just a few hours. So Mel said, oh, World Press. And his eyes got sparkly. And so anyway, I said to him after we got settled in this apartment, Mel, you go. I do not want to go. I'm tired. And, you know, I was emotionally exhausted. And I didn't want to go court the press with President Johnson. But Mel said, oh, okay. So he leaves, and I was really tired, but I was very uptight too. So I took a sleeping pill, and I went to sleep. And I was awakened. Now this is the part you'll find hard to believe. I was awakened by an announcement saying, this is a tidal wave alert. Head for high ground. And I'm thinking, are we on high ground? No, we're at the beach. We're at low ground. I don't know what to do. So, you know, I'm trying to figure it out. There was no one to help me. And the broadcast, a car was driving around with this broadcast saying, head for high ground, tidal wave alert. And I remember sitting down looking at the ocean. You could hardly see it because it was so dark. And the waves coming in, and I thought, maybe this is a good way to end it, in a tidal wave. And I just sat there, waiting for the tidal wave. And in the middle of all this, it was early in the morning by then, and in the middle, I gotta have my coffee, darling. In the middle of all that angst, Mel comes back, roaring drunk. And he said, he was very mean. And he said, the world press wanted to know where you were and if our marriage had already broken up, that you weren't supporting your husband. And he called me names that I won't repeat. And I'm going like, oh, this is so bad. So bad. I can't live like this. And anyway, I said, Mel, there's a tidal wave. And he said, maybe you'll drown. And goes off to bed. And I'm sitting there thinking, well, maybe I will drown. Maybe we'll both drown. And with that, it wasn't long until they came around with that truck again and broadcast that the tidal wave alert had been canceled and everything's okay. So anyway, I sat there all night and just trying to figure out what on earth I would do. Because I was embarrassed. I knew that the press would be after me, and I'd gotten myself into it, but I didn't know where I would be. And I really believe in taking responsibility for your actions. But some actions are really hard to take responsibility for. But I took responsibility for that. But Mel had responsibility too. So we get back to San Francisco, and that's when the topless girls are throwing rice down my cleavage. I mean, Jesus, it was not the way I like to live. And it was so crude. And that's something I really don't like. I'm mannerly, and I don't overdo it, but I don't like anyone who's crude. And there was my family. They had read in the paper, and I'd called my mother and told her I was getting married to Mel. So my mother wasn't there, thank God. But 4 of my siblings were with their spouses to greet us, and be welcoming. And Mel was so rude, and he said, as we're leaving, and I'm hugging them, but saying, oh, we've got someone waiting, and I'm sorry, and whatever I said, and trying to cover up for the embarrassment. And Mel said, more mouths to feed, I guess. Oh, my family's so self-sufficient and so prideful and so educated, and thank God they didn't hear that, and I never told them, ever. But we get home, and the next day, we went to my apartment, and the next day, Mel had to give a speech in Houston. And he wanted me to go with him, and I said, Mel, no, I have to pay bills. I had no money. I had to figure it out. And I have to pay bills, and I'm staying here. So I drove him to the airport, and I think I told you this once before. That was the last time I saw him for 30 years. He communicated with me through the press. But this is what's interesting. And another, happenstance, synchronicity, meant to be, whatever you want to call it, happened as soon as I got home from taking him to the airport. Honest to God, I'm not making this stuff up. You couldn't. So the phone rang, and it was Abe Melenkoff. Now, some of you may know him. I've known him, or certainly know who he is. He was the editor for the Chronicle, and he was a big name in San Francisco. And he called me, and he said, Pat, this is Abe Melenkoff. And I said, hi, Abe. And he said, have you seen the paper today? I said, no. He said, do you have it? I said, yes. He said, would you turn to page 4 and look at the picture and the story? And can you believe it? It was about a couple getting married in a Shinto ceremony, an American couple, but they weren't legally married because they hadn't signed a certain paper while they were there. And Mel said, or Abe said, did you sign that paper? And I said, no. Mel said we didn't have to. He wrote Life and Law in Japan, a book. He said, I know more about it than all these men around here who think they know so much. Because we'd gotten a call from the consulate or the embassy telling us we had to come over and sign. And Mel said, no, I know more about it than they do. So I was able to say to Abe, No, we didn't. He said, then you can get out of this. Now, how he knew, he just knew. Everybody knew I shouldn't have married Mel Belli. They knew his reputation. He was a scoundrel. And it seemed that the most important thing to him was publicity. And, as hard as it was for me to acknowledge, I finally did, that he had used me for more publicity. So anyway, I got a lawyer, and first I tried to call Mel and tell him in Houston, and he wouldn't talk to me. He was busy, and so on and so forth. So anyway, he was communicating through the press with me, and he said, if we're not married, we'll go to Sonoma, and we'll be married again, or Sonora, at his home, and Pat can have any kind of ceremony she wants. I love her, and she's my wife, and we're going to be married here in a regular ceremony. He didn't ask me. Well, we weren't, and it got to be a huge legal battle, and I got a lawyer finally, because most of the lawyers, they don't want to take a case against another lawyer, and certainly not Mel Belli. He's bombastic, and they were kind of afraid of him. But George Davis took the case, and Mel would never show up in court, and the newspaper reported, oh, he was in Belgium shooting hare. And I said, shooting hare? Rabbits. I go like, Anyway, ultimately, I didn't want any money. And I was sitting in court, and this thing was dragging on. I didn't know the procedure, but I was sitting at the counsel table. I'd never been to court before, except one time very briefly. And they were talking about money. And my attorney was asking for money to try to flush Mel out. And so when I heard that, I said out loud in court, I don't want one red dime from that man. And the judge said, there will be no more outbursts like that. Ms. Montandon, you go sit in the back of the courtroom. If one more outburst, and you can't even sit here. And I go like, oh, okay, It was a circus. It really was. Ultimately, though, the marriage was set aside. I've been racing through this story, and I'm reliving it in my mind. And it's like, oh, honey. And I've got many more stories, but not about Mel Belli. But life is story. Mel, he never showed up, of course, in court, but his attorney had to pay George Davis's legal fees, and that was the only money that changed hands. And George would not finalize anything until that check was in his hand. And so they had this ceremony in court, with George getting the check for however much it was, I've forgotten. And it was ended. And of course, I became a real joke in San Francisco. The whole thing was a big joke to people. And I had been dating Rudy Noble, a doctor, Dr. Noble, at that time. And he took me to lunch at Trader Vic's and gave me a little book that said, Learning Japanese in a Hurry. And of course, Herb King wrote about that. So, it took me a long time to be able to laugh about that whole thing. And, it's just another story. And people said, how could you get married in a Shinto ceremony? I said, well, it turns out I didn't. But I have no quarrel with that. any religion that anyone wants to be involved in or whatever it is. That's not the issue. The issue was me and my willingness to get involved in something like that. And now, of course, after all this time, I'm so glad I did. I mean, what a story, right? Did you enjoy this story, darling? I did too. Lots more to it, but you got the gist of it. There's one more part of it that I'll address at a later issue or a later video. The issue of my best friend's death, Mary Lou Ward, in the house on the crooked street in a fire when there was no cause for the fire, and she didn't die from the fire. And it's taken me a long time to deal with that story, although I wrote about it in The Intruders. But I think, Mel, I was involved in that. Because just one more little thing. I began dating a lawyer from L.A., and a judge, actually. He became a judge, Judge Alarcon. And Mel sent, he would never do this, but he had a lot of, for want of a better word, goons. You know, people who would do his bidding. And he sent these thugs to talk to Arthur. Arthur told me about it. And they came into his office and they said, "You are not to date Pat Montandine." And Arthur tossed them out of his office and told me about it. But there was that undercurrent of trying to get back at me, because what I had done by having this lawsuit, by not just dying or living with Mel or getting married again or any of that kind of stuff, I had embarrassed him terribly. His ego was so fragile that who knows what he might have done. Anyway, darling, poor Mel. Smart man, brilliant, but got too involved in publicity, I think, in the notoriety of what he was doing. Okay, babe, there's a story. Have a good day.